William Ernest Henley wrote a poem in 1875 that has become for many a defining idea of what it means to be human, and specifically a heroic human. The poem is called simply Invictus, meaning in Latin something like undefeated or unconquerable. It's a fairly short poem, just 4 stanzas long, that famously ends, "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." As a Reformed Christian, I never know whether to laugh or to cringe, for we know something Henley apparently didn't know, that God alone is the master of our fate. Period. Hard stop. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Thursday, September 12th, 2024. One thing I appreciate about Henley's poem is that it just may be the most straightforward and honest expression of the central error of Western civilization. I know that sounds like an overly broad statement, but in my years in ministry, I've found it to be true. And I've learned it in my discussions with people about the idea of election, the doctrine which says that God has chosen us for salvation, separate and apart from any merit or decision on our part. If there is any Christian doctrine that causes Western Christians, and especially perhaps American Christians, to squirm and react negatively, it is the doctrine of election. So all this week I'm asking a simple question. What makes a Presbyterian a Presbyterian? The real underlying question is, what are the ideas and beliefs that most define what it means to be Presbyterian? The first and foremost is the absolute sovereignty of God. That's the idea that God is the one and only ruler of the universe. Every decision we make is bounded by God's sovereign rule, which is where the idea of election comes from. It is about who really decides our fate. Do we have a role to play in it? Absolutely. But is it ultimately our decision? Absolutely not. To say otherwise is to claim for ourselves a power that belongs only to God. In the New Testament, Jesus talks about the idea of the elect. Here's just one passage from Matthew where he talks about it. Talking about false prophets who were sure to come and falsely proclaim the end times, Jesus says, "False messiahs and false prophets will appear and produce great signs and omens to lead astray, if possible, even the elect." He continues saying, "Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of heaven to the other." The idea of election, then, is, first of all, a biblical concept. We didn't just make it up. From the call of Abraham to our election in Jesus Christ, it is clear that the Bible is remarkably consistent on this point. God chooses. We respond. Think of it this way. It's like a dance. God has taken us on as a dance partner. We have a part to play as that partner, but it is just true that God invited us to dance, and God takes the lead throughout. I was talking to one of you earlier today, and we spoke briefly about this idea, and you told me the story of a friend who has a golf cart. And whenever his young grandson comes to visit, the grandson wants to drive the golf cart. Of course, he's too young, so the father sits his grandson on his lap and lets him put his hands on the steering wheel, and he thinks he's driving the golf cart, when in reality the grandfather is still operating the pedals and still keeps a hand firmly on the steering wheel. We're like that grandchild. We have the illusion that we're in control, when in reality God remains in control of our fate. But some will protest, saying, "It's not fair. Why does God choose some and not others?" The real question, though, is this: why does God choose anyone for salvation? By any standard, we do not deserve it. That's why we call it a gift of God's grace, a gift we did not earn and do not deserve. The doctrine of election, then, is simply the idea that God, out of God's infinite love and mercy, has chosen, elected, some for salvation. Personally, I like to think all will be saved in the end, but that's not my decision. It is way, way, way above my pay grade. So rather than get perturbed, it's better to simply be grateful. God has done something for us that we could not possibly do for ourselves. Who is the master of my fate and captain of my soul? Thank God, it's not me. Tomorrow, one of the most distinctive ideas of Presbyterian belief, the perseverance of the saints. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.